What we'd like to do today is we're going to do some brief introductions. We're going to talk a bit about Eide Bailly, and then we're going to go through some of the functionality of advanced financials, including statistical accounting, expense allocations, advanced budgeting, and amortization schedules. There will be time for Q&A at the end, so please go ahead and type your questions in the chat, and then what we'll do at the end is review next steps. My name's Amy Knust. I know the picture's Dino Forfonte, but I'm a partner here with Eide Bailly, and I manage our solution engineering team. Kim is one of my team members. She's a solution engineer with extensive experience in evaluating and implementing ERP solutions. She's been working with NetSuite for 10+ years, and she'll be leading us through the presentation today. Just a little bit about Eide Bailly. We're a regional CPA firm, CPA and advisory firm, and we offer a full set of traditional services in addition to our technology consulting services. And within technology consulting, we support the NetSuite application. We have a Salesforce team, we have a data analytics and integrations team, and we have a series of advisory services designed around strategic technology consulting. In terms of our NetSuite team, we currently are one of the top 2 NetSuite resellers in the nation. We are a 5-star partner for the last 5 years consecutively. And we have over 55 NetSuite consultants and over 100 NetSuite certifications within our team. So a lot of depth of expertise to support you with your NetSuite application. From an advanced financial standpoint, what Advanced Financials does is it extends the functionality of the standard general ledger to automate some business processes for you, including amortization of prepaid expenses and the associated reconciliation of those schedules with your general ledger, both dynamic and static allocations, and those can be within a given company, but across departments and profit centers and locations, or they could be across companies as well. So intercompany allocation capability is available. You can leverage things like statistical accounts, where you would track specific KPIs within your organization that then act as drivers for those allocations or can be reported on your financial statements. It can also automate your billing processes by allowing you to create billing schedules and generate those invoices automatically for you. And it allows you to support memorized transactions and reversing journals. So in addition, from a budgeting and planning standpoint, it allows you to support multiple budgets per fiscal year and includes some native budget to actual reporting. So during the demonstration today, what you're going to see is you're going to see Kim perform some static and dynamic expense allocations. She's going to show you the automation of prepaid amortization schedules. We're going to populate some statistical accounts and use those to drive allocations, and we're going to demonstrate the setup and usage of multiple budgets for budget to actual reporting. So I am going to turn it over to Kim right now. I'll go ahead and stop my sharing. Kim, do you want to take it from here?
Thanks, Amy. Are you able to see my screen? It should be a NetSuite screen.
We are.
Perfect. So first, we're going to explore the advanced budgeting capabilities within inside of NetSuite. Using NetSuite Advanced Financials makes it easier to keep track of expenses and ensure that your budgets remain under control. NetSuite provides a single intuitive interface that enables businesses to enter budgets, create new plans based on existing plans, or even import figures from an Excel using the native NetSuite import tool. During this portion, I'm going to show you how to create multiple budgets, import a budget, copy a budget, and then we're going to review the reporting of the budget versus actuals. All right. First, we're going to go ahead and start by creating a budget. So I'm just going to come in here and go to set up budgets. For this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use a subsidiary called US West, and I'm going to set up a budget for the year of 2020. As you notice here, I now have a new screen or a new field called budget category. What this allows me to do is provide the ability to assign a budget category to different budgets with the same set of information. So for example, if I had a budget for the Department of Engineering with the class of, let's say, aircraft support, I'd be able to set a budget using a budget category to be able to model my budget based on different criteria. So my criteria here would stay the same, but I'd be able to do different modeling for that type of budget. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and do a budget for the demo category. And as you can see, I have a couple different demo or budget categories set up here. For the Department of Engineering, I'm going to go ahead and do a budget to my revenue sales and a budget to my cost of goods sold. So let me just type in some numbers here. And I will do. And then I'm just going to go ahead and distribute them across so that I can have them evenly distributed across my periods. Once I've done this, I can just go ahead and save. And then it's going to create me a budget. So that's just one way that you can go ahead and create a budget within the system so I can do some modeling. Another couple examples that I want to provide you with how to enter in a budget is by going through and using last year's budget and copying it over to this year's budget. So I can use the copy from budget feature for a couple different things. So come in here and I can say I want to do another 2020 year budget. And then I can pick my legacy budget category and I can copy it to my June 2020 demo category. I'm able to utilize this modify by giving myself a 5% increase in my income, or I can choose my income and expense account types, or I can do a decrease by 5% in here as well. So I'm able to take last year's budget or even one of my other budget categories, generate a new budget, all based on what this budget was set on and giving it an increase or a decrease. Once I have it done here, I can go ahead and hit save, and it's going to go ahead and save a budget for me. Let's just go ahead and hit that save button. And now I have that budget saved. So as you saw, I just created two different budgets. One budget by doing a manual creation, and the other budget I did by using last year's or this year's 2020 legacy, and I copied it over to my new budget category called demo category. The last way that you can enter in a budget is by coming in and doing an import by using the native NetSuite import tool. So a lot of times you might be doing some budgeting within an Excel spreadsheet. You're able to take that information, download this template right here that NetSuite gives you, and take it, put in your budget information, and then you're able to select that information here and run it through and create a budget. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, this is my spreadsheet headers. And on the right-hand side is my headers from NetSuite for budget importing. It's gone ahead and mapped it because I used the template that was provided. So I don't have to do any additional mapping. The only thing I do need to do here is because in my spreadsheet, I'm using internal ID for the account number. I just need to change that there. Once I'm done with all of that, I would hit run. And it's going to go ahead and run that import for me in the background. Now that I've gone ahead and created my budgets, let's go through and look at my budget versus actual reporting. So I'm going to go ahead and open that back up over here. And as you can see, I have it filtered here where I'm looking at this year's budget for my legacy category, which was my original category, for my subsidiary, for a Department of Engineering. You can see that I have a budget here and a budget here, and I'm able to track my budget versus actuals. If I want to look at my budget for my demo category, I can easily select a new category, refresh my screen, and now it's going to give me the budget that I entered in for my from my screen that I entered in earlier for the demo category. And again, I still have it same filtered for engineering for 2020 for demo category. So the next area that we're going to review is statistical accounts. So a statistical account, and let's go back to our dashboard here, is a general ledger account that appears in your chart of accounts but doesn't impact your general ledger. So you're able to track non-monetary data and provide that ability to use within reports and income statements within your NetSuite database. So in this part, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to walk through creating a statistical account, manually entering in a journal entry, and then showing you a customized income statement to include that information. So the first thing I need to do here is create a chart of accounts for a statistical account. So I'm just going to come to the accounting area here, and let's create a new account. So the first thing I need to do is give it a number. Just going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to set up a statistical account for square footage. I'm going to use this to track my rent expense. So let's just call it square foot. The next thing I need to do here is pick my statistical account type. So down here, you can see that I have a new statistical account type. And then once that's done, it's going to give me a unit type and a unit measure here. Now you'll notice that I don't have to track anything related to currency because this is non-monetary, but I am going to have to set up a unit type. The unit types inside of NetSuite are based off of the same unit of measures that you would use to set up an item. So if I come into here, you'll see that I already have a couple units of measures set up. I'm going to go ahead and use this area 1 for square footage. It's going to go ahead and default me the square footage in here. And then I can still fill out the same information here that I could in any other account. And then I want to extend it to all of my subsidiaries. Once I have that completed, all I'm going to do is hit save. And now I have a new statistical account set up in my environment that I'm able to do reporting and measuring off of. So the next thing I'm going to do is walk through how to create a journal entry to include statistical information. Now, because this information is just a journal entry, I'm going to come down here and make a statistical journal entry. As you notice, I'm also able to import this information as well. So if you're tracking this or keeping track of some of this information in an external database or spreadsheets, you're able to take that information and import it into the system. Now, I'm also able to create a statistical schedule or a dynamic allocation. And we'll walk through allocations a little bit later in this demonstration to show you how you're able to bring that data into it to eliminate having to manually key in journal entries. So from here, I'm just going to pick my subsidiary, which is US West again. And as you can see, I have the unit of measure type here. I'm going to go ahead and select area. When I select my unit of measure, it's going to go ahead and filter my accounts for me to only show me what I can select based on that unit of measure. So as you can see, here's my square foot that I just created. I'm going to go ahead and create a amount in here. So let's just call it 2,400 square feet. And from here, I'm going to put it to my administration. And maybe I want to reduce this to 100 square feet because they're only taking up a small portion. I want to do another one for, let's say, 500 square feet for my engineering team. And maybe my marketing team's taking up a small space of this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and use, let's just say, 300 of this square feet for marketing. So now once I have my journal entry created, I can go ahead and save it. Now, as you notice up here, this is a little bit different from a regular journal entry as it doesn't have the, it doesn't require the ability to have a balanced journal entry. This is only a one-sided journal entry because it's a non-monetary value. So once I go ahead and save it, I'm going to be able to see that I have a statistical journal entry in the system. Okay, now that we've gone ahead and created the statistical journal and we have created the account itself, the next thing we'd want to do is customize our reports to include that information. Now, I've gone ahead and created one earlier and I've named it Income Statement with Statistical Accounts. So let's just open that one up and I'm going to walk through a little bit of how it was customized. So as you can see up here, I have the statistical account here. And I have one that was previously created for headcount, and now I have my new information for the square footage. I can run this one by department, and I'll be able to see that breakdown that I did for that journal entry. So my journal entry broke it down to administration, engineering, and marketing to make up my 900 square feet for this period. To bring it in, to bring statistical count information into the system, you'll need to go through the ability of customizing a standard income statement. When you customize it, what you'll do here is add a new financial section And then as you add the new financial section, you're going to filter it down to say account type equals statistical. That'll bring the ability to be a dynamic report that's bringing any new values that is in the account type of statistical into your report. Now, I can move this around. I don't have to have it at the top. I can move it anywhere within this string so I can see the statistical information. Okay, so the next area we're going to walk through is allocations. So let's go back to our home screen here. So what we're going to do is walk through an expense allocation. Expense allocations allows you to enter expenses without assigning them to classes, departments, or locations, and then giving you the ability to allocate them later based on weighted formulas. This is going to allow you to reduce manual entry by automating your monthly expense allocations. So what I'm going to walk through here is the creation of an allocation schedule, and then running that allocation schedule to generate those journal entries in the background. So the first thing I'm going to do here is walk through how to create an allocation schedule. So with an allocation schedule, and let me actually just go to the list I have created here, and we're going to walk through the creation of this rent expense one. So the first thing that you're going to do is provide your allocation schedule with a name. If you're in a one world environment, you'll have to assign it to a subsidiary. And then you're going to determine the frequency of how often this should run. If it should run on end of period, annually, start of a period, quarterly, you have some options here to select. So for this one, I'm going to say it's going to run on the end of period. And my next date is going to be March 31st because it was run previously in April. Now, if this is a brand new one, you'll actually set your next date manually for when you would want this to execute next. So up here, you can do the remind forever or the number of remaining. So you can set this on a reoccurring so it doesn't end, or you can have this be a 12-month reoccurring, for example. Using this remind forever is going to give you the ability to bring this information onto your dashboards as a reminder to show you when you have allocation schedules due for execution. And then the other area here that you're going to see is this allocation mode. So as we talked a little bit earlier on the statistical side, you'll have dynamic allocations and then you'll have fixed allocations. So for a statistical, you would end up using a dynamic allocation, which would then show you your weighted source, which would bring you into your statistical information. If you're doing it as a fixed allocation, this is going to be where you're going to allocate rent expense. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to go over here is the source account information. This is going to be where the information is going to get allocated from. So in this case, I'm going to allocate my rent expenses as they get entered in as vendor bills, and I'm going to distribute it evenly based on a percentage across my departments. So what this is going to allow me to do is if I go to a vendor bill that I have created earlier, I entered in a vendor bill for just $25,000, and I haven't allocated it to any department. So right now I just have the rent expense sitting in my account, and I need to be able to take this rent expense and allocate it across my departments based on an even distribution. And that's where this comes into play. So the one thing to note here is on my weighted percentage, if I'm using a percentage, they have to equal up to 100%. If you don't want to use a percentage and you wanted to use just a weighted value, you would just uncheck this box and it would open it up for you to put a fixed rate in there. Once you have your allocation schedule set, the next thing that you need to do is just create the journal. As you selected this button here, it's just going to go in the background and it'll go ahead and create that journal entry for us based on the expenses that are sitting in my rent expense general ledger. It runs in the background, and as you can see, it's going to create that journal entry for me. Because I have my journal set up to pending approval, it does follow that same process, and my journal entry needs to be approved before it will be posted based on my settings. But as you can see, Here is what my allocation comes out to. I had $25,000 sitting in my rent expense bucket, and here is how it's being allocated based on my allocation schedule that I had already set up. So if I come back to this rent expense allocation schedule, you'll see, again, it's being weighted by my different percentages set up here. Now, if I wanted to see what was really going on with my allocation schedules, I can even come into the history and you'll see all linked journal entries for this allocation schedule for duration of time. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the ability to create a step-down allocation, which is pretty common within cost accounting. So what this feature is going to allow you to do is define a sequence where the result of the allocation is the source pool of the second allocation and so on. So within this process, you're able to stack your allocations on top of each other. So let's go to one that I've created by using allocation batches. And if I come in here, you're going to see for this allocation, I just created it, gave it a name, when I want it to start posting, and it's going to take in my allocation schedules that were pre-built and execute them one after another in the sequence that I set up. So in any case where you have an allocation that needs to stack on top of each other and have one source of it pool to the next one, this is where you would set that information up. Once it's set up, and let's go out of here and go into view. Once I have it set up, all I have to do here is hit execute, and it's going to go ahead and execute in the background the same way it would with the journal or with the allocation schedules that I had created. So once you hit execute, it'll go through and it's going to run in the background, and it might take a few minutes here, but then it's going to show the history of it, of the journal entry located here with your, just like you would on the allocation schedule. The last area we're going to go ahead and review is amortizations. So with amortization feature in NetSuite, this is going to allow you to defer item purchases and expense charges across multiple future periods. With amortization schedules, you can streamline many redundant steps in your accounting processes, such as amortizing prepaid expenses. During this portion of the webinar, we're going to walk through creating an amortization schedule, relating the schedule to a vendor bill, and then executing that amortization schedule. So the first thing we need to do is actually walk through setting up an amortization schedule. So this is very common. This is going to look very similar to the revenue recognition schedules if you guys are using those inside of NetSuite. But instead of creating the schedule against invoices and credit memos, amortization schedules are linked to vendor bills, vendor bill credits, and journal entries. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead here to my amortization templates, and we're going to pull up this one that was created for prepaid expenses. So what you need to enter in here is the name, and then you're going to give it a standard or a variable type. So in this case, I'm going to use standard type, and then I can select my method. So NetSuite has many out-of-box methods already pre-configured for you, but if there's any additionals that you would want to create, you could utilize this custom button and create and define your own terms. So for this one, I'm going to do straight line by even periods. And then I can choose the term source. I can either select, I want my term source to be based off of my transaction date or my item receipt date. So for this one, I'm going to say it's my transaction date because I'm going to use an example of insurance expenses from a vendor bill. There will be no receipt. And then I'm setting up my deferral account. So in this case, my deferral is going to go to my prepaid expenses as well as my contra account. I can then set up my amortization period. So I'm going to have it amortized over a 12-month period and then be able to save this schedule. Once it's saved, I'm able to relate this schedule to a vendor bill in the system. So let's go ahead and create a vendor bill. Oh, actually, let me back up one more step. Before I create the vendor bill, I need to go into my insurance expense chart of account and relate that deferral expense to that chart of account. So I'm going to use account insurance expense here. So let's go into this and I will go ahead and relate that deferral account here. So as you can see in your expenses, you'll have a new field for you to relate that deferral account. So it'll go ahead as vendor bills are being entered in for insurance expense, it will know automatically to go ahead and defer them to prepaid expenses. So let's enter in a vendor bill. Pick my vendor. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and just set it to approved. And then from here, I'm going to pick my category, which will be my 6650 account for insurance expense. Let me select my amount of $35,000. And I'm going to relate it to my amortization schedule. The one I want to do is the prepaid expenses. I want to give it a start date of this month with an end date of next year in, let's just say, May. And then once I have that added, all I have to do is save my record. Once the record's saved, we'll look at the GL impact of this particular vendor bill. And you'll notice that through the GL impact, it's going to show that it was all allocated to the prepaid expenses. Even though I put in insurance expense, it knows based on our setup that we previously did that it all needs to go to prepaid expense. Now let's go and create the amortization schedule to generate the journal entry. So down here, I'm going to go to create amortization schedule or journal. I'm going to do it for my US West subsidiary. I need to pull down to a current period. So let's put in June of this year. And then as you can see, my vendor bill shows up here. I have a couple other vendor bills ready to go as well, but I don't want to run it for all of them. So based on this, I can use more of these features here to refine the vendor bills and transactions that are pulling forward for amortization. If I want to just select one individual schedule, I would go ahead and select this button here, and it's going to allow me to select only one schedule to amortize. So from here, I'm going to select my bill I just created, and I want to go ahead and create that journal entry. And while that's processing, let's take a look at this schedule that it created, which is this AS19. You can see here in the schedule, as we're looking at the amortization schedule that was created from this vendor bill, it's giving you the allocation over the duration of time. How much is going to be allocated to insurance expense monthly based on what was set up. So now let's go back, it's processing. Let's see, it should be finished by now. And it is. So from here, I can go back and I can go down to my journal entries and I can see what's going on here, or I can go back to my vendor bill and I'll be able to see this information. And I can refresh my schedule here and my journal entry will pop up here that was created for this schedule. Now, if I want to view the journal entry, I can go ahead and view it and you'll see that it's going to take funds out of the prepaid account and move it into my insurance expense based on the schedule that was just provided. So that concludes our webinar today. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass it back over to Amy and Dino for Q&A.
Thank you, Kim. We do have quite a few questions, Kim, that we're going to go through this morning. The first question is it possible to make memorized transactions for statistical journal entries so that entries repeat every accounting period. Is this what the absolute update feature is for?
Yes, you are able to do a reoccurring statistical account journal entry inside of NetSuite.
And do you have any information on the absolute update feature?
I do not, but I can take an action to do some follow-up on that one.
Okay, great. What other examples would be a good use for statistical accounts?
Head count is a very common one that we see. If people want to allocate and see how much head count is by department, we see it by rent expense, and common shares would probably be the most common ones that I typically see.
Wonderful. Next question is, I didn't see a feature when copying budgets to only copy for a specific subsidiary. Is that possible?
I think it is possible. Let me take a quick look.
I looked at the screen, Kim, and I couldn't see a subsidiary selection.
Yeah,
I almost think we'd have to do it with an import.
I think so as well. I don't see it there. I can look at that one.
We'll take an action and follow up, but I think at this point, the assumption should be if you want to do subsidiary specific updates, export your budget to Excel or export your actuals to Excel, make the change, and then import those budgets on a subsidiary specific basis. Next question, is it possible to edit an allocation schedule when the allocation methodology changes, or do you have to delete the existing allocation and create a new one?
I believe you would have to inactivate it if it was already an active one and then reset up a new one.
Interesting. Okay, thank you, Kim. I have a couple more questions here that just came in. For an expense allocation, can you get a list of the expenses that were captured in that allocation?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, we might need a little clarity on that question. If you can type again into the chat, that would be great. My guess would be that means, can you get a list of the expenses that were actually allocated? Maybe that were, or perhaps what they mean is the specific invoices that accumulated the balance that was then allocated. I'm not exactly sure.
Right.
Okay, I guess the attendee is telling me that's correct. So they want to understand that all of the expenses that were included in that allocation, what is that made up of?
From those vendor bills. So there's no one-to-one relationship with the allocation schedule and the vendor bill. It's all based on the expense amount sitting in that account. We could possibly look at doing something where you could maybe pull that in through a saved search, but it would require some custom reporting if it was going to be possible.
I would agree. I think the challenge would be you could have a scenario where you've run your allocation and then subsequently an expense was posted to that account.
Correct.
It didn't get quote captured, right? And properly allocated. So there may be a way to create a safe search that would do a reconciliation for you that validated that 100% of the expenses within that particular period got allocated appropriately.
Correct.
That might be a solution to the problem. Next question is, can you create a second budget that you could edit each month that would essentially create your reforecast budget?
NetSuite's going to allow you to edit the budget. So if you wanted to be able to utilize one budget and continuously update it and edit it, you could. I think the risk there would be that you wouldn't be able to capture quite easily what was changed over each time.
Well, and I think what the question might be getting at, if I'm going to read a little bit into it here, is I think the answer would be yes, you can create multiple budgets. So you could have your original budget, you could have your revised budget, and you could have your reforecast budget. And
Correct.
Any one of those budgets could be edited. We do see this pretty frequently as a use case where people want to have a forecast, and that forecast really represents 5 months of actuals in the remaining year of budget. And then every month you need to update that forecast with actuals, right? So that your forecast is accurate. So yes, that's a very valid use case if that's what this question is referring to. And I believe that answers all of the questions we have right now from the attendees. And thank you very much for attending our presentation. It will be posted to YouTube for future use, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our future presentations. Thank you.